everybody, and welcome to Thomas Battles. I'm your host, TrainKing James, and it has been a very long time since I've done this, and I'm glad to finally be back, do this show again, and brought on some great guests. So without further ado, we're just going to get right to it. Our first guest here hasn't done the show before, but is somebody that I've met up with a couple of times, shares the same state as I do. Great guy, amazing artist. Um, this is I'm going to botch this. Meganekko 1126. I hope I got that right.
Hey, hey, thank you, James. I'm really glad to be here. And yes, you did get it right. My name is Thomas, but my username goes by Meganekko Express or Meganekko1126 on Twitter. And yes, I am that guy who does all those art posts on Twitter of Thomas fan art. So, but I'm really happy to be here, and I'm very honored to join you guys on this.
All right, and our next guest here is somebody who I believe has done the show at least once. I think was on the original iteration with Mr. MPS 2002. You know, the lesser, not as good generation of this show. But it is WoodenRailwayOnly. Glad to have you.
Thanks for having me on, my friend. I'm glad to be here.
All right, and the third guy is somebody who has a great Wooden Railway series. Been in this community for a very long time. I believe it's over 10 years at this point. I don't believe he's done this show before. Everybody, I'd like you guys to welcome MilkTankerMedia.
Oh, sorry. Hello, everyone. Yes, this is MilkTankerMedia. It is my first time on the show, and I'm very excited to be here and ready to get started.
All right, this is amazing. We got a great cast for you guys today. So today's episode is all about summer. Summertime, it's great. It's where the engine's boilers are hot and the Thomas battlers are even hotter. So let's get right into this debate. Very excited. We're going to talk about a lot of summery things in Thomas. And what better way to start talking about summer in Thomas than with our first question is, what is the episode of the show that reminds you the most of summer? So we're going to go to MilkTankerMedia first. What is that episode for you that reminds you of summer?
All right, well, the episode for me that reminds me of summer the very most is Make Someone Happy from Season 5.
Interesting. All right, Thomas, we're going to go to you.
This one was something that I thought about for a while, but I think the one that makes me think about summer right away is Special Attraction from Season 4.
All right, and Ro, we're going to go to you now. What is that episode for you?
That episode for me, and this is almost defiling like any Thomas standards, but when I think of summer, I think of Too Hot for Thomas from Season 8.
Interesting. So we have a Season 4 episode, a Season 5 episode, and a Season 8 episode. So, all right. We'll start again with MilkTankerMedia. Just go very briefly, kind of give us your points, and why you think Make Someone Happy is the episode that reminds you the most that reminds us the most of summer.
Yeah, so when I was thinking about this question, I realized that probably a strong majority of Thomas episodes take place in the summer or at least the non-winter, to the point where anything else really is a special episode. So it has to go beyond just taking place during the summertime in order to really stand out as the summer episode. I think Make Someone Happy, it is explicitly set as, they call it holiday time, would be vacation time probably for the rest of the world. But I think it hits all of the check marks. One of the main central plots of the episode is travel. Mrs. Kindly's sister cannot travel to be with her. There is, it hits the marks of, there's a seaside journey. Mrs. Kindly loves the seaside, and part of how they make that someone happy is to take her there. It's a tour of the island. We'll talk later about how, summertime is a time for seeing the sights and getting outside and seeing all of your favorite places. And then the episode ends with a fair. And fairs, I think, are really just like a staple of summertime. Think about every state fair, every county fair, every circus, every carnival that comes to town. It's a summer classic. And summertime, above all things, is a time for joy. It's a time for celebration. And that's exactly what this episode is. It's a celebration for someone who really needs it. A time to take a break from the usual responsibilities and reconsider what really makes life worth living, and that is the enjoyment we get of summer celebrations.
Awesome. Thomas, we'll go to you next.
Okay, this one I thought about quite a while again, but the reason I think that Special Attraction comes to me first when I think of Thomas episodes in the summer is that it explicitly says that it's based around a seaside village. And every time that I think of summer, I always think of the Jersey Shore or the beaches or just like the seaside village environment. And there's a whole scene of Toby traveling all the way there, and you see the scene of Trevor as the special attraction in that quaint little village. And of course, that beautiful, absolutely gorgeous shot of Toby traveling aside the beach with the rock wall and the lighthouse in the background. That immediately came first to mind when I think of the summer. But not just that, but it's when you also get the second half of the episode where Percy is with Bulstrode, and you get that nice Knapford Harbor setting. That also immediately makes me think of summer, like these big, nice harbors that were also nearby when I ever go now to New York or anywhere, where all of the ocean and the sea is very, very evident in that episode, and that immediately makes me think of a great summertime.
All right.
And also,
sorry.
And of course, how it ends pretty much is that anytime you can be a special attraction or just have a great special time.
All right. And I believe that leads us to Ro. I want to hear your argument.
Too hot for Thomas. Now, while season 8 is a bit, word I'll use is childish, and if you look past those points, you have the story about that literally takes place because of the summer. Thomas is on a journey or is put out to go pick up some ice cream and go get ice cream for the beach because, well, they're out. So first things first, you think of summer, I think of ice cream. I think of going out for ice cream with my friends and all the good memories I have of that. And just, hot sun, something to cool down with, perfect thing, ice cream. Even the episode touches up on that. Even more, in season 8, you have that really vibrant blue sky. And then when I think of summer, I think of it being sunny. I think of it being really nice outside. And which, again, plays into the summer heat. Plays into the episode a little bit more, but again, when I think of summer, I just think of this episode because it just represents what summer is. It's going outside, going to the beach, where most of this episode takes place, and ice cream.
All right, so I'm going to give you guys about a few minutes, just kind of attack each other, beat each other down, verbally, of course. But
that was
go
not
ahead.
A transcription.
All right. Well, I think I'll begin. I'll take a little bit of issue with Too Hot for Thomas. I admittedly thought of it pretty quickly as well when I was looking for these episodes. But like I said at the beginning, I don't think it's enough just to take place during the summer, as Too Hot for Thomas does. And yes, it revolves around ice cream and the beach and things like that. But also part of what makes summer fun for me, or at least noteworthy for me, is that it's a break. As a student who is in school most of the time, summer should be a break, a time to take off from doing the regular things. Ultimately, what Thomas is doing in this episode is a job. It's something that he would otherwise usually do, and it's just kind of up to his usual season 8 antics of, oh, I don't want to do this, and here's 3 times I'm going to mess up trying to do it anyway. Whereas I think with something like Make Someone Happy, part of the episode is that they literally set aside everything that they're doing in order to tend to Mrs. Kindly, just because she needs to feel better. It's a time for them to, stop working, essentially, or at least refocus what they're working on in a direction that wouldn't be, normally there.
Now, I see your point on this. 100% I see your point on this. But if I'm thinking from the vagueness of the question, what makes you think of summer? And I think of the beach, and maybe these people on the beach are having their break, and their break or going outside is going to the beach. And that's why Thomas has to go get the ice cream. As unrealistic as it is, it's still part of the summer experience.
I think that's true, and I think that's valid. But I also feel like, everyone thinks of the beach when you go to when you go to summer. I'm trying to go for something like a little bit out of the box. Like I feel like the summer is, there's so many more places that you can go than just the beach side. And, that's why I like this episode, because it's about, rediscovering the island, basically, and rediscovering all of the people on it. Nothing is there that wasn't there before, but it's all, it's shiny and it's new and it's green because it's summertime.
All right. I also got a point about like Too Hot for Thomas. It's kind of the main reason that it doesn't make me feel about summer is that there's not really a sense that it is summer. I don't know if it's just because of the season 8 sets or whatnot, but it doesn't feel that different from like if it was shot in the spring or if it was take place in early autumn or something. The beach scenes, yes, that makes me feel about summer, but everything else does not really. Really, that's just me, or it's just because of my outlook on season 8, which I admit is not a bad season, but it's that one I don't think is one of the better ones, and I do think it's one of those standard Thomas is an idiot episode long before that became a popular trope.
Yeah, I think the episode, given its plot and given all of those tropes, I feel like it could function exactly the same way if it were it's wintertime and Thomas needs to collect the ingredients for the hot chocolate. It wouldn't change anything about the episode. It could still function exactly the same way, except he would, happen to be going to, maybe a station full of Christmas carols instead of the beach. The actual fact that it is summertime has very little to do with the plot or with the thematic elements of the story.
Interesting what
Fair
I've heard
points,
so
fair
far.
points.
I would like to hear a little bit more about Special Attraction, both good and bad, before I make a final decision. I've heard a lot about Too Hot for Thomas, but I want to see you guys kind of get after a little bit more. More about Special Attraction and a little bit more about Make Someone Happy, about why that may not be the best choice.
I think for me, when it comes to Make Someone Happy, yes, that's one of my favorite season 5 episodes. But I also think that it's like it could also take place during the spring or the early fall, and it wouldn't entirely change too much. But I also think it's kind of that there's something missing about it, I guess, or it's just kind of it doesn't. There's something I don't know that makes me miss the experience. I do think that the fair and all the carousel stuff and the games are really great. That definitely makes me think of summer. But I think it's also that some parts of it don't, or maybe it's just maybe not enough. This is a kind of hard one to argue about, honestly.
Well, that's kind of why I wanted to go for an episode that didn't, it relies also on having sort of a thematic definition of summer. It's everything I talked about before with themes about taking a break and themes about just enjoyment and the fulfillment of a celebratory life. All of those things are very present in the episode, and I think all of those things are very commonly associated with summer. I think Special Attraction, you talk about episodes that feel incomplete. I mean, it's literally two stories that were right next to each other in the Railway series, but ultimately had very little to do with each other. I always found it strange when I was watching it when I was younger. I was like, oh, Toby doesn't get to go to the thing. And now we're going to Percy for a little while. I guess we're all special attractions. It never quite clicked for me. And yes, it takes place at a harbor, and yes, it takes place by the seaside. But I think as much as that is true, it could have taken place somewhere else, and it wouldn't have made that much of a difference to the thematic elements of the story.
I agree with that point as well. Just going off of that, since you already brought up the argument of it could take place at a different time, going off of Special Attraction. I guess the term holiday season is extremely vague because, I don't know, when I think of holiday season, I don't entirely think of summer, and that could be because of the lingo in America compared to like how it was originally written. But when I think of holiday season, I think like more springtime, like you get like that spring break, because that's most schools have like a long spring break. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I don't know, I think it's more of a spring thing.
I I think, going off of that argument, though, special attraction is, we don't even get to see the festival. We don't even get to that thing that is supposed to be so iconic and so summer-like. We're kind of blocked from ever getting to that point, which is really unfortunate because, I know it plays into, the sort of what they're trying to do with Toby and being special all the time, but ultimately I think it almost undermines itself by noting that the celebration itself isn't important. What matters is you, and that's I think that takes away a little bit from what I think of, at least, about summer being really special, which is being able to get together with people and being able to celebrate as a group. And Toby's pretty much alone for the entire episode, which is a little sad, but
All right, I think I've made my decision. You guys argued pretty nicely, pretty good group here. And I'm gonna go with MilkTankerMedia's choice of make someone happy. It was the one that I definitely heard some of you guys say, was the one hardest to argue against, and I think that kind of destroys your arguments a little bit right there if you could admit something like that. Man, bro, they really got on you with Too Hot for Thomas about the summer vibes and saying that, well, I really like the argument against it saying, this episode could be about Thomas delivering hot chocolate in winter and you don't change much. And yeah, I agree with that. It's I think make someone happy kind of has to take place in summer because there's a lot of elements that directly involve the summer holiday season, going to the beach and going to this place and doing this and making people coming and making them feel better and doing. Yeah, you could make that happen in winter, but it's a little harder to do than Too Hot for Thomas. I think Too Hot for Thomas, you can kind of copy and paste it and make it a winter episode if you so wanted to. And, special attraction, getting on that case, how it, you get the sense of loneliness and stuff like that from it because Toby's by himself. I did like that argument and how the episode isn't really well put together. All right, so that is 1 point for Milk Tanker Media. And we're
all right.
Yes, we're going to go on to the next question. So, this is an interesting question. So, what pre-existing Thomas film, this can be either from the show or from the fandom, could be a summer blockbuster? For those of you who don't know, a blockbuster is those big movies that come out in the summer. Usually this year is an extenuating circumstance, but the biggest movies of the year tend to come out in the summer. The high grossers, these awesome films that everybody likes to go out and see. Movies like Jaws, movies like Avengers movies, Batman movies, whatever it may be, Jurassic Parks. They come out. There are these movies that just make a lot of money, and people go out and they happen to come out in summer because it's the best time of year for movies to come out. Most years.
I didn't know that this question was for both the actual Canon Thomas show and for the existing fandom films. That changes things. Oh.
Yes, it does.
All right. Let me go last then, if I can kindly ask, because I'm changing my argument as we speak.
Oh, okay then. Great. So, in that case, we will start this time since I believe I started with Milk Tanker Media last time. This time I will go to Thomas.
Okay, so this one was pretty easy for me, actually. The one that I think of when I think of a nice, big summer blockbuster, it's pretty obvious it's going to be Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure.
All right, so you're going to go with the Thomas, actual Thomas special angle. All right, so Milk Tanker Media, what will you have to say?
I think it's pretty clear when you look on the fandom side, there's one Thomas film that really stands out as summer blockbuster material, and that's Tobias and the Half Pariah.
Interesting. All right, so Wooden Railway Only, have you figured out your choice, or do you...
Yes.
All right, what are you going to go with?
So, as soon as you said that, the first thing that popped into my mind is actually a film created by somebody in this call titled Silver Avenger.
Oh,
no.
2014.
I'm going to have to argue against myself.
This is a Thomas Battles first, people. We have somebody arguing against their own work. This is going to be a really interesting round. All right.
Oh, how the tables have turned.
Oh, this is going to be a good fight. Thomas, we'll go to you first. So, talk about Lost Treasure.
I mean, pretty much it's what most Thomas fans like. What are the things that pop in your head when they consider the name Sodor's Legend of Lost Treasure? Well, you think of pirates, you think of ships, you think of dynamite, explosions, you think of these pirates quests and finding the treasure, all these like big action scenes that even for Thomas up until that time almost didn't think possible. You have Thomas like crashing through this like big cavern to find this giant pirate ship. You have him chasing Sailor John as he throws diamond at him as he goes to the harbor, and they go into the sea, and Thomas almost drowns. And there's just so much, and of course the pirate element and everything. It makes me think of like stuff like Pirates of the Caribbean, which is another significant summer blockbuster that you might think of, and everything about it just screams like a cohesive cinematic Thomas movie that could have easily come out during the summer and gotten a good amount of money, and it probably would have if it did more than a limited release when it first came out in 2015.
All right, so we'll go to MilkTankerMedia. Tell us about Tobias and the Half Pariah.
All right. Well, I guess first of all, for our viewers, if you haven't seen this film, you should definitely go watch it. It is by a wonderful user named Tyne Sensa, whose name you probably cannot spell just by me saying it, but he's a wonderful filmmaker and a great friend. So Tobias and the Half Pariah, the way I was thinking about this question is I thought about Sodor's Legend of Lost Treasure. I thought about all of the existing Thomas films that are, official content. And really the problem with them being summer blockbusters is a lot of them have already had their chance. Even if they didn't get a wide release, a lot of the films already got a theatrical release. Most of them had their chance and maybe didn't do all of that well. So I think in order to be blockbuster material, we need something new, something people haven't seen before. And something that I think the public would be interested in is this film that it's bold, it's action-packed, it's dramatic, it's character-driven, and above all, it could be sold as an entirely new take on Thomas, something most people haven't seen before. It's much darker than I think a lot of official Thomas content is, but I think the public would dig that. Gritty reboots are in, not to minimize it as just a gritty reboot, because it is wonderful in its own right. But I think that's what puts it a step above any of the existing Thomas and Friends franchise films, is its ability to be new, to be bold, and also to be a standalone movie that doesn't necessarily require you to have seen the entire Thomas series up to that point. It's not a lot of inside jokes. It's not a lot of bringing back old characters. It's its own thing. And it has sequel potential, which is a staple of a successful summer blockbuster.
All right. And now we go to Ro. This is going to be interesting to hear.
I'm very excited.
Oh, no.
So, Silver Avenger. I remember eagerly awaiting in summer 2014 for this film to drop. And I remember
so
watching end to end, no skips, having it all planned out. I was ready to watch this because what makes this a blockbuster is that you had the tension of season 2 building all the way up until this final movie that was gonna tie in with everything you've already done. And I'll admit, I'm almost fanboying a bit. Your series is fantastic, man. So as you build up all this tension, this final, I'll call it the Endgame type movie. It's legit a summer blockbuster. You're finally resolving all these things that your fans have been wanting to see. Now, first things first, this film is dramatic. It is very epic with the music, the Oliver Queen subplot, the goddamn, I don't know about the swearing. My apologies. I'm going to believe that. Bombing by the British government? Are you kidding me? Serious? I don't know. I could talk about this all day. The betrayal of Stafford in the middle of the... I'm sorry if you guys have... If I should take 2 steps back. If you guys have not seen this film, I'm spoiling.
Yes.
The betrayal of Stafford with a gasp and a half in the middle of it. A very big trait in summer blockbusters is things that the audience can get excited by or be surprised by. I was surprised by that. I don't know about you guys.
I mean, I wasn't surprised because...
Oh, really? But very dramatic, very almost tearjerker moments. You have the relationship of Thomas and Percy that have been going on throughout season 2 that's almost finally resolved in this film with Lady and everything. It's ridiculous.
All right. So this will be a very interesting argument here. I can't wait to see what you guys argue with. Just to clarify, for anybody watching at this point in time, if it wasn't obvious before, there are going to be spoilers. So, probably should be careful. All right, so
Yeah.
have at it. Give you guys a few minutes to do it, and let's get down it. And let's get down and do this.
Oh, Ro, you just had to go there. Oh boy. Thank you, first of all, for your very kind words. I can't believe it's been since 2014. That's so long ago. Here's the reason I'm going to argue against Silver Avenger as a summer blockbuster. And it's for a reason that I think you hit on pretty hard as a positive of the film, which is that it wraps up and ties in very heavily with the rest of the series. It ties in very heavily with essentially a television show. And I don't know when the last time you saw a summer blockbuster that was built entirely on the premise of a television show would have been. I think it's different from a sequel or like an Avengers or Endgame type material in that all of those were films. All of those were built on their same, the same medium. Silver Avenger and those plot lines were not. To see it as a standalone film, we would make absolutely no sense to anyone, I think. So as much as I appreciate your praise, I cannot see it as a summer blockbuster for that reason. And a second reason being, I haven't admittedly watched it recently, but compared to, I think, something like Tobias and the Half Pariah, it does not necessarily hold up visually. If I'm being my own worst critic here, audiences, I think, are looking for professionalism. They're looking for something that will wow them. I like to think I got pretty good at filming Wooden Railway, but what Tyne Senseth was able to achieve in Train Simulator to film Tobias and the Half Pariah, I mean, it is gorgeous. The landscape shots, the action, it is incredible what he was able to do with a computer program. And I think that's just more points in his favor, honestly. Oh, man, you're making this so hard, bro.
I see your points for sure, and I'm almost going to use your points against you about how if you see your series, I mean, like a television series, and you compare that to, like, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, let alone those are films, but everything built up to Avengers Endgame, and there's a reason why Avengers Endgame is the highest grossing film of all time, is because everything led up to there.
Because the previous things that led up to it were also films. You don't see... imagine if, like, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. had come out first, and then they made an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. movie. Like, you can't rely on people to have watched, dozens of hours of television in order to be able to go see the movie and understand it.
I really
100%.
And I really got to say that as well. It's pretty much expecting, like, if the Simpsons movie came out and pretty much no one knows about them, the Simpsons movie, actually, something like that, has to bother setting up who these are for people who don't know who these are, at least give them a brief, like, explanation of what they do, what's their personality kind of thing. So imagine if you had to watch, like, 10 seasons of The Simpsons to understand, like, what's going on in this movie kind of thing. And it's not the same, but you get what I'm trying to say. It's like you have to see this in order to understand that.
Exactly. You cannot rely on audiences having caught up to a television show in order to make a blockbuster movie make sense. It doesn't work. I'm sad to say.
You think everyone in the world watched Infinity War before they watched Endgame? Absolutely not.
Again. It is all movies. It's a different beast. It's the same medium. Watching 2 3-hour movies is a lot more manageable than watching 2 seasons worth of television, essentially.
You have to think of it in the sense of your videos are 10 to 15 minutes per episode, and towards the end they start getting a little bit longer. So you add that in, and it's about 2-3 films worthy of runtime to get into Silver Avenger, if that makes sense.
I also think going away from this, God, you're making me lose my train of thought. Get it? Trains? Ha! Okay.
Ah, we got jokes.
All right.
I think, part of what I think about in, um, a summer blockbuster being able to stand alone as its own film is not just, what leads up to it, but what it sets up. And I think, something like Silver Avenger is so ingrained in being just itself and being just a longer episode of the series. Basically, that's all it really was a really long episode of the series. You look at something like Half Pariah, you even it's a standalone film, but it's self-encapsulated and it sets up for a sequel, and that's part of what makes summer blockbusters big is their potential for follow-up films. Essentially, I don't see that as much as Silver Avenger, and I don't see that with Legend of the Lost Treasure. I think it falls into the same trap of relying on needing people to know a certain amount of content in order to understand it. Everyone's heard of Thomas the Tank Engine before, but I think what makes Legend of the Lost Treasure so special to hardcore Thomas fans is not what's going to, if you take that away, for general audiences, it's not going to be the same. Part of what makes it so special for people like us is, all of these returning characters. We get to see Donald and Douglas again. We get to see, the small engines. There's Railway series references. It's, the anniversary and all of these big things. And if you take that away, it's such a large part, I think, of what makes the movie special for us, that if it's not there for general audiences, I think it loses a lot of that sort of appeal of blockbuster.
Not necessarily, because this is the thing about Tobias and the Half Pariah. I love Tyne's Sense movie. It's great. The problem is that it's supposed to be a Thomas movie, but pretty much if you look at how Thomas is in Tobias and the Half Pariah, he has just about as screen time as he does in Magic Railroad. And most of the people are being like, if this is a Thomas movie, why is Thomas not really in it this much? And I get it that it's mostly about a different character, but it's a character that most fans are going to have to and are aware of, that this is going to what's being focused on, but most people don't know. And I get that that Tobias and Pariah establishes who Toby and Henrietta are, but they're probably the audiences are going to be like, why are we focusing on this one if this is a Thomas movie? Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure is exactly that. It's about Thomas. It's about his character and how he changes throughout the movie. And it does briefly establish who Thomas is at the beginning and who he turns out from in the end. And I would argue about the fan service stuff, because the fan service stuff, like the small railway, Donald and Douglas, are, yes, they're part of it, but they don't come off as distractingly. And even if they are, some people will be might have a curious idea of this is obviously part of the lore or some expansion about why Thomas's universe actually is. And also, I would argue that Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure has the benefit of having the late John Hurt, Eddie Redmayne, and Jamie Campbell Bower, and Olivia Colman in it. So it actually has the star billing power to be a summer blockbuster.
I think that's a valid point. Counterpoint, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this movie, Legend of the Lost Treasure, already had a theatrical release. It had its chance. It had its star power. It had all of the things that you say, and it's not like it's now beloved as an animated summer classic. Whereas something like Half Pariah, granted it's only been released on YouTube, but think about how it could be marketed. Think of it as something that is a reinterpretation. It's a reboot. It's something bold that people haven't seen before. Thomas and Legend of the Lost Treasure, as good as it is, it's something that people know. It's familiar. It's something that people expect to see out of Thomas and Friends. And part of what makes blockbusters really interesting, I think, at least the good ones, is that they do something new. They try something bold, and they reimagine. You think about things, reboots happen all of the time in Hollywood, and they're frankly some of the most, these sort of adapted films from earlier source material. They are often the ones that are the most profitable and the most successful in their marketplace.
Now, you have to correct me if I'm wrong in this, even though I love Tobias and the Half Pariah with all my heart. Love it. Just getting that out of the way. But when I heard about it, it was people talking about it on Twitter, and it had already been released. I'm thinking of summer blockbusters as something you build up to. Something like, let's say you have a trailer like 2 months beforehand, and everyone starts talking about it. I could be completely wrong because I might have been out of the loop, but when I first heard about Tobias and the Half Pariahs, other people were already raving about it, and it came out of like the blue, so to speak.
I mean, I think there's something to be said for indie hits as well, things that maybe you don't expect to be as successful as they are, and then they achieve success on their own merits. You know, we all watched Legend of the Lost Treasure because we knew it was the next Thomas film. You know, you said yourself you watched Silver Avenger because you watched my series and you knew it was coming. Tobias and the Half Pariah became popular on its own merits. You know, I think you're absolutely right to say that most people probably hadn't heard of the film or hadn't heard of the channel until it started to blow up. And I think that really speaks to its growing power. And that just goes to show that this is a film that could succeed in a blockbuster capacity. I mean, it's doing exactly what a blockbuster does, which is, you know, make fame for itself.
All right, I think I have my decision. And once again, I'm sorry, guys, but I'm going to have to give this to MilkTankerMedia. You guys had some really good points to kind of take him down a bit a couple of times. Especially that point about the casting and the point about not necessarily hearing about Tobias and the Half Pariah. But, you know, Milky, again, you just came back and you just had something to defend yourself. So I got to give you credit where credit is due. That was really well-argued question. We took a lot of time. I was going to cut it off sooner, but you guys were arguing really, really well. I really just want to keep that energy going. So, really good job. So that's 2 points. So,
Did you just call him Milky?
maybe I
It
did.
wouldn't be the first time.
Saying MilkTankerMedia, make MilkTankerMedia is too long, and I ain't got time to say both names. Speaking of which, I was very surprised that nobody did say the closest thing to a summer blockbuster film Thomas actually had was Magic Railroad, but I'm kind of glad that we got to do some other movies because we all know what happened to Magic Railroad.
Yeah.
Yeah, another movie that I think sort of had its chance.
Yeah. Alright, so we're going to move away from the film department for a while of Thomas, and we're going to go to a more imagination kind of state of way of battling. So, you know, congratulations, guys. You guys just got a ticket to go to the island of Sodor, and, you know, you three get to choose where you want to go. So, Ro, we're going to start with you. Where would you have your ideal Thomas vacation?
All right, so for my argument here, I'm thinking of like vacation is something I want to do different. I want to go do something that I can't do in a regular spot. That being, I would like to go to Coldy Fells.
Coldy Fell, alright. Thomas, we'll go to you next.
This one was something that I also put a lot of thought into it, but pretty much I would love to just go to the Arsdale Railway.
Arsdale Railway. Or any particular part or just the railway in general?
Just the railway in general, because I think there's just so much about it in general that I would just love about it.
Alright, so that just means, MilkTankerMedia, you get the last spot.
I sure do, and I think based on how I had prepared for this question, I'm going to have to agree with Ro. I would go to the Coldy Fell Railway.
Alright, so we have a very interesting position here. You two could tag team together and answer this one as a team. You guys could also do this one you could argue this question the same time as each other, but unfortunately, or you can argue the same point, but you can't use like the same arguments, if that makes sense. Or one of you can change your answer right now. So, keeping in mind a few things. If you guys decide to team up, you each can get 1 point. However, if Thomas manages to beat you, he'll get 2 points. Might want to think about the fact that MilkTankerMedia also already has 2 points. So you two can make that decision right now.
Now, I would love to team up because this is a great argument. But hypothetically speaking, if we were to team up and to win, that guarantees you the win. So in that case, I'm personally saying I'm going separate.
All right. So are you going to continue to argue Coldy fell, or are you going to kind of pick something else right now?
I'm going to continue to argue for Coldy fell.
All right. Since you made the decision, I'll actually let you go first to explain yourself.
So does this mean I have to now choose a different topic?
Oh, no.
Or
You can still argue Coldy fell, you just can't use the same reasons he does. So I'll be kind of paying attention to that. So now
and
it
I
makes it
and
a
I
little... What?
so it means I have to come up with better reasons for the same place than he does.
Yeah. So you have to basically
Okay.
try to explain him, if that makes sense. So this really has become a question of what's better to go to, the Archdale Railway or the Coley Felt Railway. All right, so let's get this going. Ro, you're on first.
Now, I apologize if I take your argument milky, but
Well, I'll
we are.
allow you to go first, only.
But this is a Thomas battle, and the worst comes out. Anyway, Coldy Fell is unlike anything that you could travel to. Sure, you could go to the beach, but you can do that anywhere in the States. You could go, I can't even think of anything at the moment. You could go hitchhiking up some mountains of such the Coldy Fell Mountain, where you could see railway engines or take you up the mountain, such as Devil's Back, and see a glorious view at the top by rail. Sure, you could hitchhike up the mountain, or you could take the rail up the mountain. You get to see some very unique characters and friends, and you get to see a beautiful view.
All right. MilkTankerMedia, I'll let you go next. Since you, I'll let you go next since you're also arguing the same thing, and then we'll have Thomas go last.
All right. Well, I think Ro made some very, of course, some very interesting points that I would love about the Coldy Fell Railway. You mentioned the jaw-dropping view. You mentioned the natural beauty. You mentioned the unique engines. But I think there's more to it than that. I thought about it, and Sodor in general has a lot of places of natural beauty. I thought about arguing for the Skarloey Railway for that exact same reason. But what I realized is the Skarloey Railway is really, it's heavily trafficked already. It's very touristy. They come to expect tourists. And the same can be said about a lot of the places on the Northwestern Railway, Thomas's branch line and things like that. So what makes Coldy Fell more unique, I think, is that it's more lesser known. And in that sense, when I like to go on vacation, I don't necessarily like to encounter huge crowds. And I think Coldy Fell would be a great way to sort of enjoy some parts of the island that aren't as well known. Somewhere where there isn't going to be, lots of people that get in the way and litter everywhere. But somewhere where you can just feel a more sense of solitude and serenity with that. And along with that, you mentioned, of course, the unique design of the engines. But I think it's also an opportunity to talk to some individuals. If we're assuming that we're allowed to talk to the engines, it's a chance to talk to some individuals who we haven't heard that much from in the Railway series and not at all in the TV series. A chance to learn more of their stories that we wouldn't otherwise get to hear. It's a first-hand perspective on some of the least known characters, whereas you could go to the Skarloey Railway and hear all of their stories, and you could go to see Thomas and hear all of the stories we've seen throughout the series. But Coldy Fell engines might have some interesting things to say that we haven't heard yet, and that, I think, is another very strong point of appeal about Coldy Fell for me.
All right, Thomas, you're up. Talk
Yeah.
about Arsdale.
Yes, I would talk about the same way that MilkTankerMedia actually pointed out, because yes, people know who Rex, Mike, and Bert are, and they're really great characters, but we do also now know that there are more than just those three, and not just including Frank and Jock, because you have all these other characters that have been introduced, like the Sigurd of Arsdale and the Blister Twins, and I also wanted to know about those types of characters as well on the same kind of way. And unlike the Coldy Fell engines, all of them have different designs, but they also pretty much are almost guaranteed to have very bigger personalities that all stand out from one another. We all know that Rex, Mike, and Bert do that, so it's pretty much insinuated that all the other ones would have these big personalities. Jock pretty much is cocky or very big-headed, and Frank, we already get an idea that he's very grumpy and ill-tempered. Not in the same way as Mike, though. No, it's probably, I think everyone would assume. And I just want to know more about also like the Blister Twins and Sacred of Arsdale, but just of how like nicely compact the Arsdale Railway is. One of the things that I don't like about when I take a vacation is walking from place to place. And on the Arsdale Railway, you just take the train, and pretty much everything you need to enjoy on it is with the train ride distance away, or at least a nice, pleasant walking distance away. Everything feels on the Arsdale Railway feels so nicely compact. You get everything you need to enjoy yourself in a very small amount of space. And you can just see them work, and all the locations are very nicely placed with each other. It's a kind of the thing. Big things come in small packages, and sometimes less is more kind of thing. You get to enjoy everything from a very small thing, and I like that.
All right, so you guys have a few minutes. I'll let you guys battle this one out. So it's basically the Coldy Fell versus the Coldy Fell versus Arsdale. Let's do this.
Coldy Fell ×2. Here we go.
Here comes trouble. Double the trouble.
I think I see what you're saying about the Arsdale Railway being compact, and it is nice to have some things that are close together and sort of not have to do a whole lot of walking if you're not into that. But I worry about something like that becoming dull after a little while. I don't think the Arsdale line is very long. I think it's very short and very sweet, and I'm sure it's beautiful. But I think, once you go around the line once, what else is there to do? I mean, the rest of the railway is basically industrial. It's ballast and it's wool, and there's not a whole lot to go off of there. I think with Coldy Fell, you have kind of the best of both worlds in that it is, again, not particularly a long line. You go up the mountain and you can come down the mountain, and there's things at the top of the mountain. But Coldy Fell itself is more than a railway. It's a mountain. And you have the opportunity for those who want the option of a bit of a more active vacation. Someone who likes to hike. I love hiking on vacation. It's a lot of the places we go. This is like, this is the Swiss Alps. This is Yosemite. This is Arches National Park. There's so much to see by being active. And if you're not active, that's okay too. You can ride the train and you can hang out at the cafe at the summit. So really it combines the best of both worlds. And I think in that sense, the Arsdale Railway is really missing out.
I would argue in that as well, but it's also that thing that, again, it's a same railway going up and down, but it's also kind of a safety purposes. When I think of a nice place to vacation, I want to relax. And if something goes wrong on that railway, whether it's a big storm or something, wind or something like that, what's going to get hurt by the most? And that's pretty much that whether it be Devil's back, pretty much the whole thing. I do not want to be in that kind of environment. And I understand that weather reports are kind of thing, but summer weather, you cannot predict it. And I just don't want to be in that kind of place if something does go wrong with Mother Nature. I understand it's a great thing and it's a great novelty and everything, but there is concerns about safety. And I know that the whole story is about the Coldy Fell is concerning about safety, but it's always a conscious thing. And of course it's Sodor, so anything can happen.
I guess Milky made the point about how at the the Coldy Fell Railway, you have such unique characters and that you can talk to. Meanwhile, at the Arsdale, while I think they're all great characters in general, I think they would just bicker with each other. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Sure, they'd act up for the passengers and stuff like that. But at the Coldy Fell, you get such an interesting perspective, like, again, MilkTankerMedia was talking about. Not only that, when you think of the Arsdale Railway, I think of it being like, correct me if I'm wrong, but a relatively flatter railway where you're only going there to see the engines themselves because, they're such little engines, and why not check them out in their little railway? While when you're going to the Coldy Fell, you're going to see the beautiful nature that Sodor provides of its mountaintops and stuff like that, and you get the plus of the characters. So again, I could be stepping on MilkTankerMedia's toes here, but you get the best of both worlds.
I also don't know that I take a little bit of issue with Meganekko's point about we know that the minor Arlesdale characters have big personalities because obviously they do. It's like we don't know anything about them, and same thing could be said for the Coldy Fell engines. There are like 3 characters we don't know about on the Arlesdale Railway. We know on the Coldy Fell, we know Coldy and we know Patrick. And that's about it. There are so many more people there with untold wealths of stories yet to be told. That is a huge untapped resource. And part of what I like to do on vacation is get the stories of the local people who are there. What do they know that is something that's more than what can be found in a guidebook? So I think having that wealth of resource there is a huge plus for the Coldy Fell engines, and I don't really think it's something that's going to be unique to Arlesdale.
That would be said, but you have to keep in mind also that the Coldy Fell engines have 1 book, and if they did have a lot more of that, then they would have more than 1 book. The Arlesdale engines appear in, I believe, 3 or 4 books, not including the 2 that are dedicated solely to them. So there's a lot of much more interesting stories to be told, and a lot more stories to be on the ride for in this case, because pretty much you have both the small railway engines, Jock the new engine, and also all the times that they went for looking for Duke if you're going by the railway stories, and all the times that they interact with Duck and his friends on the Little Western. I just think that it's probably more there is pretty much that you can expect and get a lot of fun out of when you go to the Arlesdale Railway compared to the Coldy Fell engines, because yes, you said exactly what you said, because Coldy and Patrick, and maybe Wilfred, but nobody really knows what Ernest, Shane Dooney, Alaric, and Eric, or any of the other ones do. And I think if they had something to tell, then they probably would have told it by now.
Well, I think you're brushing over the fact that sometimes the best stories are the ones that we haven't discovered yet. Is there no interest in finding things that haven't been talked about? The Coldy Fell Railway and Coldy Fell Mountain itself is isolated. It's a place where there can be mystery. It's a place where there can be sort of untapped stories yet to be discovered. It's almost mythical in that regard. Arlesdale Railway, you pretty much know what you're getting. You're getting the same stories that we already know, that have already been printed. We know what those characters are like. We know what they do. Coldy Fell, we have no idea. And I don't think that's because there's no stories to tell about them. I think that's because there are lots of stories, and it's our chance to go and find them for ourselves.
I 100% agree with that. And I also think we're thinking about a vacation spot. If I'm going to go to the Arlesdale Railway, I'm not just going there to see the engines, because I'm not going to lie, if I'm there a day or two, it's going to get repetitive pretty quickly because it's just up and down the line. If I'm going to the Coldy Fell, I'm going to check out the scenery and listen to the stories. So let's say I go up the mountain one day, and the next day I go up the mountain again, but this time I go to the right, or the other side of the mountain. I could hitchhike around. There's so many other opportunities going to the Coldy Fell for vacation and staying interested and doing something that's different than my normal day life. Don't get me wrong, it's very different meeting little engines, but meeting engines that work up mountains and exploring that mountain and have the ability to stay there a week or two and still finding new things that's not repetitive is pretty attractive to me.
And I think you're right to point out that there are safety concerns. I'm not going to say there aren't. I think there's safety concerns anywhere you go. And I think it's exactly for that reason that the Coldy Fell engines would have interesting stories to tell. They stare danger in the face every single day. There are, I'm sure, countless incidents they could tell us about that we've never even heard of, but are just breathtaking. The things they have to face and the bravery they have to do what they do. It's the difference between talking to, we're essentially some really interesting ballast workers on the Arlesdale Railway versus talking to, you think about firefighters or soldiers. Who do you think is really going to have the more interesting stories?
All right. This is pretty difficult. So here's what I'm going to do because I'm still stuck. I want both Ro and MilkTankerMedia to both say, one thing right now that, like, about your vacation spot to sell me. Sell me why I should go to Coley Fell, because I'm kind of torn between the two of you. So, sell me right now. Why should I go to Coley Fell? And you're going to tell, one of you is going to tell me why. And I want to figure out, between the two of you, why I should do it.
Go ahead, Ro.
I'll let you go first. You let me do my argument first. I'll let you do this one first.
All right. Culdy Fell is full of the engines that Audrey didn't want you to know about. Their stories are the most interesting you'll ever hear. An untapped wealth of never-before-seen knowledge. And with it, a wealth of hiking trails and an opportunity for an active lifestyle, or a relaxing train journey, but all peppered with beautiful landscapes and interesting personalities that are going to be unique to you, never before seen in print.
That is a tough one to follow up on, but I'll counter with the Coley Fell. Your experience is subjective because you can do whatever you want to at the Coley Fell, whether it be just hanging out at the hotel and just admiring the scenery around it, or you can go up the mountain and admire that scenery, or stay at the bottom and explore the stories that the engines have to tell. There's so many possibilities. You can either relax all day or go hiking all day. There's so much to do over, let's say you're going on vacation for a week. There's so many possibilities for you to do.
All right, I think I have my answer. I'm gonna go with, again, man, this may be a shutout, but this is MilkTankerMedia. He's gotten the point. Now, as of right now, yeah, that was pretty hard to do. I mean, that was a pretty tough position to be in, and, you really sold me on the untapped story potential. I mean, Arsdale Railway is fun, but it's like, to me, the Arsdale Railway, when I think about the Arsdale Railway first, I think ballast, and when I think about Coley Fell, I think about the mountains. I think about going to places like Devil's Back or going up to the summit, the hotel. And there's a lot of things that you guys touched upon. Arsdale, to me, when you described it, I didn't get vacation vibes. It sounded like something you'd go to. It'd be cool to go to the Arsdale. Like, would I want to go to some of these heritage railways in the UK? Yeah, but I wouldn't consider it a vacation in and of itself. I would consider the trip in and of itself of going to these places a vacation. But I wouldn't consider the Arsdale Railways a vacation. But the way you guys described Coley Fell, that felt more like a vacation to me. So I gotta give it to MilkTankerMedia. So as of right now, technically he has won, unless at some point there's a double up question coming up, which I'd be surprised if that happened. And he somehow gets caught up, but as of right now, he has won. But anyway, so let's keep going. We still have two more questions here. We've been recording for quite some time, but that's fine. I don't mind doing long episodes. So the next question, and we're going to move away from imagination, and we're going to talk about songs. Because everybody loves summertime and songs. People have certain songs that they love to listen to in summertime, those summer hits. So, what song are you guys going to listen to from Thomas on a long summer drive? I mean, this just gives me such memories of meetups, going out in places, and thinking about just blasting Thomas music in the car and stuff. It's fun. And, so what songs do you guys think about playing in the car? We'll start with Thomas again. I think that'll be fun.
Is this kind of is it a song that you have to listen to on an infinite loop kind of thing since it's a long drive?
No, it's just a song that, like if you were going on a long drive, this is a song that you're going to make sure that you absolutely are going to listen to.
Okay, so the first thing that I would love to sing for on a nice long summer drive is "It's a Great to Be an Engine" from season 5.
All right. Ro, we'll go to you next.
I would like to listen to Percy's Seaside Trip.
And MilkTankerMedia, what song are you picking?
I think I would absolutely have to include James the Really Splendid Engine in this summer drive playlist.
All right, so this is going to be pretty interesting. All right, so we have 2 Season 5 songs and a Season 6 song. So, go back to Thomas. Explain yourself. Then move on to Ro, and then MilkTankerMedia.
Explain yourself.
Yes. So it's great to be an engine. First thing that I think of the catchiest Thomas songs and the ones that I can listen to all day, every day, and never get tired of. It's great to be an engine because I love songs like Thomas's Anthem and the Island Song, but those are the ones that are done nicely in measured doses. And it's pretty much some of the other ones including both James the Splendid Engine and yes, but it's great to be an engine is the one that I could listen to on an infinite loop. I cherish that one. It's the one that makes me proud to say I love Thomas, and it's just so incredibly catchy, and it's just so upbeat and lively and cheerful, and it pretty much is cherishing what we love about Thomas and all of his friends. It is great to be an engine. You can't really deny that. It might be easier if we just were engines.
All right, Ro.
All right, so listening to a song, a Thomas song on a long summer drive, now that's, again, subjective because if I'm by myself, this song would automatically make me happy. And if you're with other people, then again, it'd be even more fun. But seeing I'm probably driving by myself, just putting that scenario out there, this song has always had like a special spot in my heart because it just has an aura of nostalgia to it. It always, always, always puts me in a good mood. When I listen to this song, sometimes I'll be in bad moods, and I'll admit I throw this song on, and it's just a song where I can listen to it, and then once it stops, I press the replay button and go again. Because A, it brings back good memories for me, B, it brings good memories to come, and C, it just makes me happy.
All right, and MilkTankerMedia.
So when I think of, especially as someone who has driven cross-country across the Midwest with Mr. MPS 2002, by the way, on that long drive, we did not play any Thomas songs. That was fun. His playlists are largely DJ Khaled. But when I think of a Thomas song that I would want to listen to on a long summer drive, I think big road trip energy. I think memorable lyrics. I think something you can dance to in the back seat, something that is upbeat and exciting and that you can, if not sing along to, at least hum along to. And James the Really Splendid Engine absolutely encapsulates that. He's already got what I think is one of the most memorable themes from Thomas, outside of maybe Thomas's theme himself. But it's bouncy, it's jazzy, it's swanky, and it's freeing to just listen to it and let yourself move to that beat. Even if you don't know the lyrics, everybody knows what James's theme sounds like, and you can already kind of hum and scat along. It's memorable, and frankly, I think if James were a person, he would love the summer, and he would constantly be out working on his tan. And I think that tells you all you need to know about how James's wonderful song relates to the summer. It's just something I would love to have playing especially while I'm with other people, and we can all just kind of jam.
I am now picturing James sitting in a lawn chair with sunglasses on, jamming out to his own song.
I do listen to my own music.
That is big James energy right there.
That is BJE.
Yes,
pretty much James energy.
Yeah,
That is definitely going to be the title of this episode. All right, guys.
Yeah,
So,
but
all right, guys. So go at it. Let's hear you guys debate some music.
okay, so the reason, yes, Percy's Seaside Trip, I almost considered that one as well, but then I remembered that and James and the Splendid Brand Engine are also pretty much just derived from the themes that you don't need per se, because you could just, like he said, like MilkTankerMedia said, you can hum the tunes to these songs, but pretty much you could easily interpret them as either Percy's Season 5 theme or James's classic theme. But it's great to be an engine pretty much is the go-to upbeat song for me. It really, because it encapsulates not just one character or you think of just isolating on one specific character. It's pretty much celebrating all the engines in this case, and not just Thomas really. I mean, it does have mostly Thomas in its name, in it, but it's specifically for all engines, whether it's the standard gauge engines, whether it's the narrow gauge engines, whether it's the Coldie-Fell engines, whether it's the Arsdale, you name it. Because so everyone who who sings or listens to this song can find some true enjoyment out of it and not feel selective about it per se. But it really is the encapsulating, cheerful Thomas song that you can listen to all the time, and really you won't get tired of it.
My only counter against that song, and this is a very difficult, this whole question is difficult to counter against, is that in that song, they admit that the island of Sodor is like, fictional?
It's cold in the winter time, I believe, is one of the lyrics to that
When it's
particular
cold
tune.
in winter time.
Still, you could be there. That is Percy's Seaside Trip.
Oh, yes, that's Percy's Seaside Trip.
Yeah, there's two lyrics
but
you guys
I
are
will use
talking
that
about.
to argue against Percy's Seaside Trip as well.
But I'm just thinking, they admit that, like, the island of Sodor is fictional and this is a world of imagination. Don't get me wrong, I mean, obviously it's true, but it's almost a vibe killer. Because you're just in this land of...
I always did find that a little bit odd compared to a lot of the other songs. I think it happens a little bit in, I believe, the Island song, though it's a little more subtle in Children Follow the Dream to a Land of Make-Believe.
Yeah.
You like to, we like to imagine that Sodor is a place we can go to. And all of those themes about, celebrating all of the engines and it works for everybody, that's all great, but I can't help but feel like it's undermined by acknowledging that none of them are real in the first place. And what I'll say about Percy's Seaside Trip, and I also consider this song very heavily. I love this song. I think it's really great. And it has, a lot of the same summer themes that we've already talked about. Obviously, the seaside, beach going, things like that. And then I remembered that's not really the question. The question is, what song are you listening to on a long summer drive? And especially as someone from the Midwest, if I'm driving somewhere in the middle of summer, I'm not going to the beach. Minnesota is about as far from the beach as you can get. So in that regard, I feel like if I was driving from like Minnesota to like Chicago or something, I wouldn't necessarily want to listen to a song about the beach, knowing that the most I'm going to get is Lake Michigan or something like that. Not that I don't love Lake Michigan, but you get what I'm saying.
I see what you just said. Minnesota's largest thing or longest thing from the beach. Now, I'm not geographical at all, but there might not be beaches, but Minnesota is known for the land of 10,000 lakes.
It is known for its lakes. It is not, however, known for being seaside, as per the title of Percy's Seaside.
Fair enough.
And here's something that I'm going to argue. It's like, I'm really going to dig the knife in a little here because I love James's theme, no question. The song is really catchy, yes. But if there's a certain person who happens to dislike or hate James as the character, and if that song plays, they're just going to remind someone about James and how they do not like them.
That's oddly specific. This sounds like you have a personal vendetta against James.
Hold on,
and as the host
James?
of the show, I don't know that...
This is going to be interesting because...
You might be hurting your argument talking about James in front of James.
You don't want to talk about James like that, my friend.
No, but this is just from my experiences that when you watch something like Apology Impossible, well, what do you think? Do you like James, really?
That's different, though.
I don't think it's fair to judge
years and years later. That's years and years later.
Yeah, but
I don't think it's fair to judge the merits of this particular song on what many, especially fans of James, do not consider to be a very good James episode.
Yeah,
I'm part of that category.
Yes, but there are a lot. I have a lot of friends, real close friends, who even before any of the big road adventure or the CGI flanderization, that they still did not like James. And that's even coming from people who just grew up with like all the classic series and episodes, and they still just did not like James. I'm not technically one of those, but I do see why that they may feel that way.
I'll admit, James Are Always Fun and Edge is a very toe-tapping song. I'll admit that. But at the same time, I feel like that song would be enjoyed a lot more with company. And I'm thinking of the scenario, I'm by myself. Don't get me wrong, very toe-tapping song. Percy Seaside Trip, on the other hand, that's going to bring me into my feels.
Well, when I think of long summer drive, I think of road trip. I think of going somewhere with friends. That's something that a lot of people do with their friends during the summer is go on a long road trip. I've, as I said, done it myself with Mr. MPS. And frankly, like in that kind of scenario, you want something that you can both sing along to. You want something that you can both enjoy and kind of, I think James, the Really Splendid Engine, has like kind of the perfect shout chorus set up. Make way for James, hooray for James. Try to listen to that song and like be in a good mood and not shout that chorus. It's so good. Plus, I have to admit, I like jazz. Get all your B-movie references out. But James, the Really Splendid Engine, think of it with an instrumental break in the middle and a jazz solo. Think about a killer sax solo in the middle of James, the Really Splendid Engine, played by James himself, wearing sunglasses on a lawn chair. Think about that and tell me that doesn't exude road trip energy. I don't know where I'm going with this.
But then again, I've also done this one myself because back in January or so, I went on a trip out to New York with Matt Machado, Enterprising Engine 93, and a couple of his friends out there. And one of the songs that we did sing along to was "It's Great to Be an Engine," and and even the guys who didn't want to sing were reluctant to, were eager to sing that one actually, including Matt, of course, but that's just Matt. But it's also that kind of thing that I imagine It's Great to Be an Engine. It really, again, it's going back to the ensemble piece. Like with James' Splendid Engine, I can imagine just James doing that. That's fine. But I love big ensemble songs. Like Will You, Won't You from The Great Race is a good example. But try to imagine It's Great to Be an Engine done in that way with all the engines singing, and I feel so welcome and surrounded by all these great characters who all say they're all proud to be engines and they're all really happy to be who they are.
All right. So, this is another interesting question. Man, this is hard because I've definitely listened to all three of these songs, and just listening to your arguments, man. I mean, this brought back some great memories. However, for once in this episode, somebody else is gonna win, and I'm gonna give
No.
Don't worry, the streak is broken. It was hard to make this decision, and but it will go to, it does go to Wooden Railway Only row because, man, these are hard. This was a hard question to argue, and it really just came down to whose argument I liked the best. I liked your argument about, being able to listen to this song on your own with friends, and a lot of you kind of harpened with friends and without friends. And it's like being able to do a long summer drive means sometimes you're going to have to do parts by yourself, sometimes you're doing it together. The fact that he loves this song a lot when he's alone gave it the edge. And man, this is so... That was a hard one. Gotta say.
Tough question.
It is a tough question.
This episode has had a little bit of everything. This has been... I'm like tense over here.
All right. So we'll do one more question. Unless something crazy happens here, we'll see. MilkTankerMedia will be the winner, but we'll just go through this last question. Now we're gonna go back to our imagination. So, congratulations, you've been invited to a vacation on the island of Sodor. The Fat Controller would like you to pick somebody to take you around. So the question here is, which character would be the best tour guide for your vacation? Now, you can go off of your previous question, for example, where you said certain characters. You can go off of, other characters. If you were just vacationing the island in general, who would you want as a tour guide? Who would you want as your tour guide? You can think about all sorts of perspectives. MilkTankerMedia, since you're most likely going to be the winner, we'll go with you first.
All right. Well, I think the character I would most like to be my tour guide on showing me around the island of Sodor would have to be Toby.
Interesting. All right, Thomas?
This one was actually a bit easier for me, but I really have to say Edward.
Edward. All right, and WoodenRailwayOnly.
Now, originally, I was going to say Edward,
Oh.
but I'm now changing my argument to Thomas himself.
So we have Roe arguing Thomas, Thomas arguing Edward, and MilkTankerMedia arguing Toby. So this is interesting. So 3 railway engines. I'll actually save my thoughts on that. So we'll just get right into the, explanations, and then we'll get into the debate. So, MilkTankerMedia, let's go on with Toby.
Well, when I think of who I would want to be a tour guide for my vacation, I know I want somebody who's knowledgeable, somebody who knows the railway inside and out, someone who's been there long enough to know its history and to know its stories, but also somebody who's going to notice the small details, things you wouldn't otherwise notice, things that are beyond what you can just read in the guidebook or on the wiki, if you prefer. Toby's someone who would have that knowledge. He would be reliable enough to take you around and to know everything. But he's also someone who's going to be able to slow down, to let you enjoy the sights. He doesn't like to rush through things. He likes to take his time. And he likes to take his time to appreciate the natural world and everything that's around him. He's definitely a friendly engine. He knows and is friends with basically everybody on the island. So he can get you the inside scoop with everyone he already knows. Can introduce you to the locals, take you to see the nooks and crannies we otherwise wouldn't see. And as much as he loves, staying on the tour of what we know and all the historical important sites for Sodor, we've also seen that he has a propensity for adventure. He's down to venture out into new territory. He's always excited to go exploring. See, for example, Toby's discovery, in which he discovers a whole new piece of the island's lore, essentially. So he's someone that's going to get you a unique experience, engage you with the local community, and be friendly enough to help you feel like your experience and your tour vacation was really, truly one of a kind.
All right, Ro.
So for Thomas, I'm thinking that Thomas basically grew up on the island, so he must know it back to front. And if I'm bringing in the show, which I kind of have to, he has been basically everywhere on the island because of unrealistic writing. He has been everywhere. I don't know why he's off his branch line, but, that's been going on for how many seasons now? Regardless, he has been everywhere, and he knows everyone. And I can guarantee you, Thomas has a billion stories to tell about almost every location he'll take you to, whether it's about friends, whether it's about what happened, whether about his past experiences. I just feel like Thomas would be a lot of fun because he knows and basically grew up on this island. So you're taking his own experience of his maturity as you're taking the tour guide.
All right, that leaves Thomas to talk about Edward.
Okay, so pretty much my big thing for Edward is not just because he's one of my top 3 favorite characters, but he's pretty much been on the island of Sodor the longest, I guess, out of all of them, or at least the ones that are still actively around and been from, like Thomas, every point, nook and cranny across the island. But the thing about I love Edward is that he's pretty much a friend to everyone around him, and he's the most kind, and he is the most patient to deal with anyone who would be, and he would be perfect to deal with just about anyone who's curious and wants a tour of the island of Sodor. And you can't really go wrong with the engine who started it pretty much on the railway series, that Edward would be the most appropriate.
All right, so argue it out.
I think I thought about Edward for this question. I very strongly considered him for a lot of the same reasons. He's been around a very long time, as has Thomas. He's somebody who I think would know a lot of people and would know the island very well and its history very well. And I think he is very patient. But I think all of those things can still also be said about Toby. And in addition, as I mentioned, Toby is someone who's willing to take a risk a little bit. He's willing to take a chance, even a small one, to discover more about this place that he lives in. Again, see Toby's discovery. I don't think Edward would have made that I don't think he would have taken that chance. I don't think he would be the one to go down the old branch lines and look for new things. And I think Toby is someone who is willing to do that, but is also going to be careful enough not to get himself in real danger, which is not something I think I could say about Thomas. Thomas, I think safety is a big concern. As much as he's been everywhere and done everything and miraculously survived thanks to, the writers, I think I would feel very uncomfortable going on some unexplored path with Thomas as opposed to with Toby.
See, personally, I am more like Thomas, where I more see things to learn things or do things to learn things. And if it ends up negatively, it ends up negatively. But then again, that makes a fun story to tell. So obviously, safety is a concern. But at the same time, if you're looking for a fun tour guide who's going to give you something, a tour that you're going to remember, and don't get me wrong, I don't think Edward and Toby would be bad in any sense of giving tours of remembrance, if that makes any sense. But I feel like with Thomas, you have something special there. You have something different could happen from every other tour. Let's say suddenly the island of Sodor started giving tours just religiously. That's all they did. I feel like Thomas would be the most popular, not only because he's the title character and the most popular character, but because he has so much to offer.
Well, I think that could also be a point against Thomas in the fact that he would probably be the most popular. I feel like I would want someone, maybe a little bit more off the beaten path, someone who hasn't been sort of jaded and worn out by all of these tours. Thomas, it's again going back to kind of the same argument for why the Culdee Fell Railway as opposed to somewhere like the Skarloey, is because, it's a little lesser known. It's not the obvious choice. It's not, I think Thomas would be so popular that it would almost become more like a theme park ride, or more like, very touristy, as opposed to really making you feel like you can have a unique experience with him.
And personally, those are all nice points in both areas, but I feel that Edward is the perfect in the middle of those two things, because because Edward pretty much has the colors and the names associated that some people would say that's a good reason and get popular results from it. But at the same time, you also get take the best aspects of Toby, that he's not the most obvious one you would think, because he's only the number 2, not the number 1. But it has both of the benefits out of the two, and getting rid of most of the flaws with both them, whether it's Toby's a little too quaint or too much of a novelty. And Toby, even there's numerous character cards that describe Toby as being temperamental. That's one of his major flaws. I see that Edward is the more patient to deal with any kind of tourist who may act out and try to dissuade the situation. Toby might just say something a bit off and maybe instigate something, and he has known to do that every once in a while. And Thomas pretty much is, again, he's Thomas. There's something, if something goes wrong with Thomas, it's not going to be that well thought out. And pretty much with that word is that he's the most patient, and for me, the least biased. So he will give a pretty much honest, 100% honest retort or statement about wherever he's going. He might give us personal experience, but he will say primarily really what you need to know, and make it interesting.
Well, I think, sticking entirely to the facts and entirely to the history and what you need to know, you could read all of that in a brochure. You could read all of that on the Thomas Wiki. You want someone who's going to venture off the beaten path a little bit and take you somewhere that you might not have expected to go. I don't agree with your statement that Toby wouldn't be as suited for tourist work. I think a lot of what he does is tourist work, even on his old line. Even before he came to Sodor, he was used to tourists and to dealing with them. And yes, maybe he's been called an oddity or quaint over his life, but I think time and time again you've seen he doesn't let that get to him. And the other thing is that coming with Toby is Henrietta. I mean, who do you think you're going to be riding in while Toby is giving you the tour? And time again, we've seen Henrietta be a grounding force for Toby. If he's getting temperamental or something like that is happening, you have that dynamic there, something to keep him grounded, something to keep him from going off the rails. as it were. And plus you get a wonderful character dynamic thrown in. It's almost like a bonus tour guide thrown in, 2 for the price of 1.
Yes, but there's also that chance that what happens if Henrietta's out of service? And you have to think of that perspective kind of thing that it's not always going to have those two kind of thing, but it's kind of with Edward that you pretty much will have a good experience regardless of which one he's interacting with, because he's interacted with all of these characters so well, and he knows how to deal with them properly.
Well, Thomas, you're guaranteed going to have Annie and Clarabelle, so you get 3 for the price of 1, if you're making that argument. And now I'm going to counter both of you guys at once here with trying to juggle. Now, Toby, well, I think he'd be an excellent guide. I think he'd be amazing on the branch lines, and I know he's not shy to step outside his comfort zone, but I feel like Thomas just has more to offer outside of the branch line. While Toby might be more knowledgeable on the branch lines, I know I'm saying branch lines a lot, I feel like Thomas, because of his years and years of unrealistic writing, has more experience about what's going on the entirety of the railway. Like,
I'm not
he could
sure
take
that
you
that's true. I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think we've seen a lot of what Thomas has done. I think the writers focus on him because he's the main character of the show. I don't think that means that he's the only character that interesting things happen to. And
I'm not saying
again,
he's
we go
the
back
only
to
interesting.
we go back to the point about maybe we want a character that we haven't heard as much from. I feel like we know all of Thomas's most interesting stories. We've seen them portrayed in all of the episodes and all of the movies. And we've seen a lot of Toby's most interesting stories, but I think he'd still have more to talk about. I think, Thomas would love telling the same stories over and over again and probably boring all of the other engines to death with it. But I worry that it might get boring for the audience who might already know, oh, one time I found Great Waterton, and one time I went to the Great Railway Show, and all of these things happened, and yes, we already know that.
Interesting.
I also think, as Toby, do we know, has he ever ventured up to, the Arsdale Railway or all the way across to...
I believe his home is at Arlesdale End.
Yeah, that is true. That's
a complicated aspect of the show.
Very complicated aspect of the show.
Yeah,
Master of the Lemons
Coldy Fell
has entered the chat.
Well, actually, Toby's home is never. I can imagine that somewhere he heard that comment. He's like, "Oh, I felt a disturbance." But anyway, so let's wrap
I felt
this
a
up.
disturbance in the force.
Yeah.
and I think of
Do you have one more thing to say?
yes, I think one more is that again, Thomas and Toby are also built for smaller runs kind of thing. They are primarily best suited for the branch lines. Even though Edward is older, he's still the best suited for wide range traveling out of the three, because he can best suit both suited mixed traffic. He can suit it on for both mainline and branch lines just very nicely, because he's not too big, he's not too small, because he's very useful.
It's very multi-Green Thunder.
Yes, he's very.
Yeah. I think you mean Train Zone. Excuse me.
Actually, it's a Rainbow Station.
Yeah, but pretty much with old reliable Edward, you can guarantee that it will be the best in terms of being usage of where you want to go, and you will get there.
I really don't
count on
think
you can count on him.
I really don't think you should underestimate little engines, my friend. I think it's a fatal flaw that has resulted in many a character story.
Yes, but keep in mind that Edward was bullied by all the other 3 larger engines, so technically he kind of counts as a small engine, but not the smallest.
All right, so this was a really interesting fight, and once again, I know who I'm picking, and I'm gonna give this one to not the character, but the person, Thomas. Your argument about Edward, but there's a few things that I thought about with each character, and it was like certain things I wanted to hear, and you brought up Edward's age being one of the first engines, and, Edward being one of the first means he can show, explain things that Toby can't show, because Toby is not as old as Edward in terms of, being on the island. And then you have Thomas, and on one hand, Thomas is going to probably have the more action-packed, adventurous tour. Edward's gonna be a little more. Edward's gonna be a little more safe. He's gonna be safer. Thomas, I feel like there's like you have to put out like a waiver or insurance policy or something. But yeah, I feel like something of the kind would have to get worked out before the trip. But yeah, I'm gonna give this one to Thomas. However, this still makes Milk Tanker Media our winner for today. So
Woo!
that brings an end to this episode. Does anybody have anything to plug? Any final words?
Well done, everyone. Well done.
Yes, I think everyone brought some really good things, and I think we all brought our own victories in this kind of case, because I feel like everyone did win at least one thing, and I think we all learned some things about it, about their reasonings too. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I'm really glad I was able to hear some perspectives that I hadn't thought of before. I think you both made some really compelling arguments in a lot of places, and I'm just delighted to talk about this stuff with other people who are really excited about it.
All right, so it has been a great episode of Thomas Battles. I'm TrainKing James, your host. We hope to see you around on community radio as we have a long, summer lineup coming up. This is a great time of year. We're going to have a lot of stuff coming out this month and next month. It's the Super Summer Spectacular here on community radio. Ugh, I cannot talk tonight. And, it's been really nice being here. So, we had Meganekko 1126, WoodenRailwayOnly, and MilkTankerMedia here. And I'm TrainKing James signing off on Thomas Battles. So, goodbye, everyone.